Okay, for our last installment of our video notes, we are going to go with blood typing in the cardiovascular system. Blood typing is something that it's not new technology, it's not necessarily new in terms of what we know in our lives, but in terms of like medicine, back in the day there wasn't a whole lot of worry about it because they didn't even think about, oh, somebody's bleeding, let's give them some more blood from somebody else, let's figure out how to put this in. But you can imagine, though, once somebody did figure that out and they gave it a try, the effects that actually had on that organism were kind of hit or miss because they didn't actually know what was going on the red blood cells within the blood, all these different interactions that could either cause you to live or die. So we're going to actually kind of go through those things. In order to understand blood typing, you actually have to understand what the erythrocyte structure is composed of, or in not so fancy terms, red blood cells. You already know that red blood cells are the absolutely positive, most abundant formed element in your blood. That's actually what gives your blood the red color, is the fact that you have so many red blood cells in there. Red blood cells are specialized. If you remember correctly, in the formation of a human and how cells are developed, red blood cells are specialized, meaning in their genetic code, they have sections that are turned on and turned off, and it tells them exactly what to be. Red blood cells are so specialized, they really only have one function. Their function is to transport oxygen and carbon dioxide within the bloodstream. So it takes oxygen to cells for use, and it removes carbon dioxide waste from the cells, and it does that via the bloodstream. The red blood cells are suspended within the plasma, which is that yellow matrix. Each red blood cell, in terms of characteristics, is called a biconcave disc. It's like looking at a donut that caves in towards itself, but you don't actually end up with the donut hole. Their reason they're shaped like a biconcave disc has to do with the increase of surface area for diffusion of oxygen and carbon dioxide. So if their main purpose is to transport those elements and compounds to and from cells, then the main thing they need is they need enough area to absorb and carry enough of that oxygen, carbon dioxide to be efficient and adequate. The other reason they're a biconcave disc is it allows for a bend and squeeze in multiple directions. A lot of your blood vessels, when you get down to the capillary level, are extremely narrow and extremely small. Having a biconcave shape actually allows them to slip past and through, even if the vessel itself is smaller than the red blood cell. So if you look at this, here's what I mean by biconcave, meaning two concave structures. So this is a red blood cell cut in half, and you can see it dips in the middle on both sides. If you compare that to a lymphocyte or a specific type of white blood cell, you'll see that white blood cells are about 2 or 3 times as large. And there's a comparison here. Just another visual image of red blood cells traveling down a blood vessel. And this is a pretty adequate image of blood vessels trying to travel through a capillary. You'll notice how some of them are bending and twisting in shape in order to pass through that. Some other characteristics of red blood cells that is actually really important are, and there's 2 of them. They lack a nucleus, so they do not divide. This is why hematopoiesis or hemopoiesis is very important. The fact that all your red blood cells are created in your bone marrow, and they're created and then they're absorbed into the bloodstream. So they actually do not have the ability to divide within the bloodstream themselves. Once they're there, the red blood cells are what they are. The other thing is they don't have any mitochondria, so they don't have the ability to produce ATP. This is actually kind of works to their benefit. If you think about it, why would having no mitochondria actually benefit oxygen carrying function of red blood cells? If you remember from your bio lessons and from what I've taught you in this class, is oxygen is the main component in cellular respiration. Cellular respiration is performed within the mitochondria to generate ATP, cellular energy. If the main function of a red blood cell would be to carry oxygen, and they also had mitochondria, the efficiency of their function would be drastically reduced, meaning those mitochondria would use the oxygen that they're trying to carry to create ATP. So it would be counterproductive. Therefore, red blood cells lack mitochondria. The other characteristics, within the red blood cell or on the surface, there's molecules of what are called hemoglobin. Hemoglobin is a very specific protein, and it's about 95% of all the red blood cell proteins on the entire cell itself. What their function is hemoglobin is the actual protein that binds to oxygen and carbon dioxide and carries it throughout the bloodstream. If you take hemoglobin and you break it down into sections, there's one particular section called heme. Heme is a pigment in hemoglobin, and it has a little bit of iron on it. That iron molecule is what is attracted to the oxygen molecules. That characteristic itself, so the iron on heme as part of hemoglobin, is what combines with oxygen so it can be carried throughout the entire circulatory system. The amount of oxygen that can attach to a red blood cell depends on the concentration of oxygen within the plasma. So if there's low oxygen concentrations in the plasma, there is not as much oxygen being carried by the red blood cell. Something I would love to point out to you is if this is the hemoglobin molecule on the surface of the red blood cell right here, and there's the oxygen, that oxygen is attaching itself to an iron. If you are anemic or you know somebody that is anemic, it is a characteristic or, I don't want to say disorder, it's a deficiency of iron in your body. If you have a deficiency of iron in your body, you lack the ability for your heme on your hemoglobin of your red blood cells to work appropriately or carry enough oxygen. A lot of people that are anemic experience drowsiness, fatigue, and tiredness. They bruise easily because there's not as much oxygen being carried throughout their entire body, which results in limited amounts of energy and that fatigue feeling. So, low concentrations of oxygen in the plasma then allows carbon dioxide to attach. So there's this give and take relationship between oxygen and carbon dioxide and which one's going to attach and detach itself from a red blood cell, and all of that is based on the concentrations in the plasma and outside the plasma. So another way to explain this would be if I had, I don't know, let's just say I had this cell right here. And then I have, I don't know, let's draw. So then let's say I had this blood traveling down this blood vessel right here. And then inside that blood vessel is a red blood cell. You like that? It's very beautiful. If there are a high concentration of carbon dioxide inside this cell, that means the concentration is lower here. That also means that the concentration of oxygen is higher. When that occurs, you have to remember that things like oxygen and carbon dioxide move by diffusion from high concentrations to low. So since there's a high concentration of oxygen within here, it's going to naturally want to go inside the cell. And what actually happens is that carbon dioxide, being in high concentration inside the cell, naturally wants to move out. And it ends up exchanging with that red blood cell. Now that oxygen is going to be carrying the carbon dioxide back to the heart, which travels to the lungs, so that same gas exchange can occur in the opposite direction, getting rid of carbon dioxide, picking up oxygen. Right. Well, what does this all have to do with blood type? Red blood cells have another characteristic. That other characteristic that they have is that they have proteins on the surface of themselves. So you have the biconcave red blood cell, and on the surface of it are some proteins that kind of say, hey, I am me. I am this specific red blood cell, and I am yours. So what we found out through science is that there are really only two types of proteins on the surface of your red blood cells. You either have one type, another type, a combination of both, or none at all. So that presence or absence of that specific protein, which is called an antigen or an agglutinogen, two different names for the same thing, wouldn't be the English language without them. This right here are the names of the proteins on the surface of red blood cells that give you your blood type. Your blood type is determined by your genetic makeup, and we know how this works through codominance. A and B are codominant together, etc., etc., and your parents' blood types are what determine yours. There are 3 types of surface antigens. Really and truly, there's only there's 2 that determine the type of blood and 1 that determines an additional factor in that. So we have A antigens on the surface of your red blood cells. We have B antigens on the surface of your red blood cells, and we also have what is called RH antigens. Everybody's probably heard that, oh, I'm type A, I'm type B blood, I'm type O blood, I'm type AB blood. But the other factor that comes into play there is there's also things like I am A positive. Positive or negative is the additional antigen called the RH antigen or rhesus antigen, which we'll get into here in 1 second. If we take a look at this picture right here, what this is representing are the 4 basic blood types as determined simply by the A and B antigens. Some things you have to notice about this picture. Well, as soon as I can find where my mouse went. These red blood cells in the blood type A, you'll notice they have green kind of shaped things on the surface of their cells. Those green shaped things are a specific shape different than that of the type B blood because this is a specific type of antigen called the A antigen. The presence of the A antigen means that this is blood type A. If you notice over here in B, you will see that it's a different type of shape representing the antigen. The reason it's different is because it is a different antigen. So for this blue triangle, the presence of it indicates that you are blood type B. However, it wouldn't be anatomy physiology without throwing some kinks in there. We also have blood type AB. Blood type AB is a combination of the A antigen and the B antigen together on the surface of the red blood cells. So it's a combo of the green and the blue triangles on the surface. So this gives you blood type AB. The biggest thing I have to get you to remember is the fact that your blood type is determined by what is on the surface of your red blood cells. And the last blood type as determined by the AB antigens is blood type O. Blood type O is 0 antigens on the surface. There's no A, there's no B. It's just simply the red blood cell itself. So, based on the presence or absence of surface antigens, we have 4 blood types. You have A, which means there are A antigens on the surface of the red blood cell. B, which means there are B antigens on the surface of the red blood cell. AB, which means there's A and B. And O, which means there's absolutely 0 antigens on the surface of the red blood cell. The other factor that ends up us having in a total of 8 different blood types as a human species is what is called the rhesus antigen. So in addition to having an A antigen, there's an additional one called the rhesus antigen. If that rhesus antigen is present on the surface of the red blood cell, it is called being rhesus positive or Rh positive. What does that mean for you? That doubles the amount of types of blood that we have in human beings. So let's say that you are blood type O. Blood type O means there are no A or B antigens on the surface. So if you take a look at this one here and this one here, you will notice there are no A or B antigens on the surface. But you will notice this one down here has the rhesus antigen on it. This one up here does not. That's where we get the positive and negative indicators in blood type. An O negative person means they do not have A or B antigens, that's what the O part means, and the negative portion means they do not have the Rh antigen. Down here, this one is Rh positive, but it does not have the A and the B. That means that it is O negative, O positive because of the fact that it does not have A and B, but it does have the rhesus. And if you work your way through all of these, you will notice there's a positive and a negative for each of the 4 blood types as determined by the AB antigens. If you have the A antigen, no rhesus, A negative, A positive. B negative, B positive. AB negative, AB positive. So that means there are a total of 8 different blood types for human beings. So, that characteristic of antigens on the surface of the red blood cells is specifically what gives you your blood type. Also within human beings, suspended within the plasma, there is a substance that is also tied to your blood type. But it doesn't determine your blood type. It is essentially the opposite of your blood type. In your plasma, there are these things called antibodies, or agglutinogens are the fancy words, agglutinins. Their job is they help you, technically speaking, make sure that it's only you within your blood, meaning only your red blood cells are there. Antibodies' job is they attack the surface antigens of foreign red blood cells, meaning you have type A blood. If something other than type A comes in, you have antibodies that will come in and attack it. But those antibodies are specific to a type of red blood cell. Let's take a look at this. Here are all of your red blood cells. You have A, B, AB, and O. These are the antigens on the surface of the red blood cells. Suspended in the plasma are things called antibodies. Antibodies' job is to attack foreign red blood cells. What I need you to look at is if you are blood type A, you have antibodies that attack B. If you are blood type B, you have antibodies, these pink things, that attack red blood cells that are blood type A. If you are blood type AB, notice there are no antibodies. It's a good situation to have. If you are blood type O, you have both antibodies. What this means is the presence or absence of antibodies is actually what is going to determine whether or not you can receive a specific type of blood during a blood transfusion. So,